my friend Vince and I had been best friends since we were little kids. We grew up together in a small town, a place that had both charm and trouble, but overall it wasn't the worst place to call home. When we still lived there, everyone knew about the old creepy house that looked completely different from all the others. It looked like it had been built 100 years ago. The place had been abandoned for a long time, and my friends and I used to make up scary stories about what might have happened inside. By mid-October, the whole town was already deep in the Halloween spirit. People were putting up jack-o'-lanterns, fake spiders, skeletons, hanging ghosts, and orange lights all over their houses and yards. One Friday night, Vince and I decided to sneak into that old house and check it out for ourselves. We went there around 9 p.m. The street was pitch black, no street lights, and the house across from it was completely dark too. The only light came from the moon, so we pulled out our flashlights. The front yard was overrun with tall, tangled weeds. We decided to circle around to the back, hoping to find a way in. To our surprise, the back door wasn't even locked. We just stepped right inside. Without our flashlights, we wouldn't have been able to see anything, so that's how dark it was. The house was much larger than the others nearby, yet somehow it felt cramped inside, like it was made up of dozens of small rooms connected by narrow hallways. Vince started walking around, exploring another room. Everything looked ancient, like the furniture you'd find in my grandpa's house, only covered in dust and untouched for years. I explored the first floor and found a short hallway with several doors that seemed to lead to bedrooms. I stepped into one of them. I pulled open a few drawers, but they were all empty, probably looted long ago. The closet was the same. The only things left were a few old broken pieces of furniture. After checking the entire first floor, I went back to the hallway. 2 doors remained. One led to another room and the other to a staircase that descended into the basement. Then I started going down the stairs. Each step creaked under my feet. About halfway down, I noticed a faint glow coming from below. I turned off my flashlight, but the glow didn't fade. That should have been my warning to turn back, but my curiosity was stronger. I kept moving forward. When I reached the bottom, I peeked around the wall. There were 3 candles burning on a small table. But that wasn't what made me freeze. It was the wheelchair beside it, and there was someone sitting in it. The chair was facing the other way, so all I could see was a single pale hand resting on the armrest. Every instinct in me screamed to get out. I began slowly backing up the stairs, doing everything I could not to make a sound. Every creak echoed like thunder. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whoever, or whatever, when it was down there could hear it. When I was halfway up, I looked back. The candles were still flickering faintly. I kept climbing. When I was nearly at the top, one of the steps cracked loudly beneath my foot. I didn't think twice. I bolted up the rest of the way, and when I reached the top and turned around, the light was gone. The basement was completely dark now. The thought that someone had blown out those candles made my skin crawl. I closed the door quietly and made my way through the maze-like house until I finally found the staircase leading to the 2nd floor. Softly, I called out for Vince, but there was no answer. I took a deep breath and started going upstairs, still calling out his name. There was no answer. When I reached the top, I shouted louder, "If you're trying to scare me, stop it. I'm serious. There's someone in the basement." Just then, Vince stepped out of one of the dark rooms, his face pale with fear. He asked if I was being serious. I said, "I'll explain outside, but I'm not kidding." He didn't ask anything else. We both headed straight downstairs. This time, I didn't care about the noise. I just wanted to get out of there. We rushed toward the back door, the same way we came in. But as we passed the hallway near the basement door, we both saw it. A dark, shadowy figure standing right in front of it, holding a sword. We ran, We tore through the yard and sprinted as fast as we could toward the car. I jumped in, started the engine, and sped off without looking back. I don't know who or what lives in that house, but I know one thing for sure. Someone was down in that basement, whoever they were. I never wanted to find out, and I never set foot on that street again. This story happened at the start of October. It was my very first autumn living in the house I had recently purchased. I planned to decorate my home with themes inspired by fall and Halloween. I bought several items from nearby stores and also browsed through a few different apps and websites. I simply typed autumn decorations, and one listing immediately drew my attention. It displayed a large yellow plastic bin packed with fall-themed ornaments. I clicked on it for more information, and the description basically stated that everything must go. A full container of seasonal decorations for a low price. It was just $15, which was an unbelievable deal. The entire bin appeared packed with decor. At the bottom of the post, it also mentioned selling other items too. So I tapped on the seller's profile and browsed through some of his other listings. There was a mixture of various things. The man's name was James. I messaged him and he responded almost immediately. I asked what kinds of decorations were inside the bin and he replied, all kinds. Both indoor and outdoor pieces plus a few extras. I quickly answered saying I could come pick them up right away if he was home. He said he'd be home around 10 p.m. after coming back from out of town, and then he sent me his address. I searched the address on maps. Honestly, it wasn't in the nicest neighborhood. Just to be cautious, I asked my friend Jeff to come along with me. I picked him up. He didn't live far from my place, and then we headed toward James's house. It was roughly a 45-minute drive, and we chatted throughout the ride. When we exited the highway and entered the town where the house was located, Jeff began half joking about how sketchy the area seemed. I knew he was only half joking, partly to ease the tension, but also because everyone knew that town had a rough reputation. It was already dark outside, so all we could see were the glows of streetlights, traffic signals, and a few small stores. As we got closer, my phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a message from James. He wrote, "When you arrive, just come inside." We eventually pulled up to the house and turned off the engine. The lights inside were dim, barely visible through the closed curtains. I picked up my phone and texted James back. "We're here, parked in front of your house." Jeff and I both kept our eyes on the house from inside the car while waiting for his reply. Then we noticed something. One of the curtains shifted slightly, like someone was peeking out at us from within. A moment later, the curtain fell back into place again. Shortly after, the front door creaked open and James texted once more, "I'm at the door, you can come in." The atmosphere was growing tense and I was incredibly relieved to have Jeff with me. We stepped out of the car and slowly made our way toward the front door. Before we got too close, I called out James's name a few times, but there was no answer. Jeff whispered, "We should just leave." I took a few more careful steps and called again, louder this time. "James." Still no response. I turned toward Jeff and muttered, "Let's go." And we began heading back to the car. Suddenly, a man's voice shouted, "Hey, I'm here inside." We turned and saw a man standing in the doorway, but only half of his body was showing, as he peeked out from behind the door and motioned for us to come in. Jeff and I exchanged uneasy glances but cautiously approached. As I got nearer, he opened the door all the way and then stepped out of sight. We entered, deliberately leaving the front door open behind us. The moment we crossed the threshold, a terrible odor hit us, something rotten and unbearable. We heard quick, heavy footsteps moving away into another room, followed by his deep, unsettling voice saying, "In here, come on." His tone was so low it made my skin crawl. I made sure Jeff stayed right beside me as we stepped into the next room. And what we saw was deeply disturbing. A dimly lit living room with a disgusting stench. It smelled like death itself. In the center of the room sat a large black plastic bin. James stood next to it with both of his hands hidden behind his back. It was the first time I got a clear look at his face, and he didn't look friendly at all. He told me to come closer and open the bin, but I immediately noticed it wasn't the same one shown in the photo from the ad. The color was completely different. I told him to open it himself. As he lifted the lid, a wave of putrid air hit us so hard we both instinctively turned and bolted toward the door without looking back. By the time my car engine roared to life, we were already speeding away from that house. We never discovered what was inside that container. But one thing was certain. It definitely wasn't decorations. It was an unbelievably disturbing and unexplainable experience. Ever since that night, every time I think about buying something online, that memory always creeps back into my mind. This occurred in October, roughly 5 years ago. I still remember it vividly because that was the first year I had ever lived alone in Asheville, North Carolina. I was renting an apartment downtown, close enough that I could walk to nearly every place I needed. What I appreciated most about Asheville overall was how many hiking trails it had to offer. One afternoon, I decided to explore DuPont State Forest. The drive from Asheville took close to an hour. It happened to be a Saturday and also part of a long weekend. The leaves had already begun changing color. The perfect season for hiking. I arrived at the park's lot and found the starting point of the trail. I walked for quite some time and the path was eerily silent. I was completely by myself the entire time. One of the main reasons I'd chosen that trail was because it led to two amazing waterfalls, Triple Falls and High Falls. It was roughly a 3-mile trek to reach Triple Falls. The sight was absolutely breathtaking. I sat down on a large rock, took a few photos and some short videos. That's when I noticed a man standing on the forest path, staring directly at me. I waved at him, but he slowly turned around and walked deeper into the trees until he vanished from view. I didn't think too much about it. I stood up and got back on the path, continuing my hike until I reached the upper part of the waterfall, High Falls. There I took more photos and videos and then sat back on a dry rock. But then I saw the same man again, standing near the trail's edge between the trees. Once again, he was just staring at me. I didn't greet him this time. I pretended not to notice. But after around 15 seconds, I looked again, and he was gone. From what I could make out, the man seemed to be around 60 years old, but he was standing far enough away that it was hard to be sure. I kept hiking until I came across another landmark along the path, a covered bridge. I stopped again to film the scenery and snap a few more pictures. I reached into my bag for my water bottle, turned toward the end of the bridge, and there he was again. I swear he hadn't been there before and I hadn't heard even a single step. He was staring at me again like I had somehow done something wrong. I began to feel uneasy. I walked toward the man, but he instantly turned and walked away. For someone his age, the speed was odd. Too quick, almost unnatural. For a moment, I worried he might be someone with a condition who needed help. But I didn't have the nerve to follow him. I just leaned against the bridge rail for a few minutes before deciding to go back. I had been walking for about half an hour, so the return trip would take about the same time. As I made my way down, I passed two women coming up the trail. I stopped and asked if they had seen that man. They looked confused and said they hadn't seen anyone matching my description. I told them how I'd kept spotting the same strange man appearing out of nowhere, staring at me before disappearing. After chatting briefly, I continued heading down the path. For the rest of the hike back, I started feeling slightly paranoid, afraid he might suddenly show up again among the trees, but everything stayed calm. I eventually reached my car without any problems. That night, my friend and I went out to a nearby local bar. I told him the entire story about the man on the trail, and even he agreed that something about it sounded unsettling. After a few drinks and some conversation, I went straight home to my apartment. Once I got there, I went right into my room and fell asleep. I rarely ever wake up in the middle of the night. I usually sleep like a rock. So when I suddenly woke up in total darkness, it felt incredibly strange. I was still half asleep when I heard something coming from the corner near my closet. I turned my head and saw a man standing there. A wave of pure terror rushed through me. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, loud enough that my neighbors must have heard, even with the windows shut. I tried to back away from the figure as far as possible. The man then turned and calmly walked out of the room. I stopped screaming, now just trying to steady my breathing. I turned on the light and shouted, demanding to know who was there. But there was no reply, only silence. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and jumped out. I turned on every single light as I moved through the apartment until the whole place was bright. After checking every corner, I found no trace of the man. I didn't know what else to do, so I called my friend right away. I just needed someone to talk to. After I explained everything, he told me it was probably a half-asleep hallucination. He said I might not have been fully awake yet, and my eyes could have been playing tricks on me. Deep down, I knew there was a chance he was right. That night, I went back to bed, but this time I pushed my closet up against the bedroom door, just to be safe. A day later, my father called to tell me that his brother in Switzerland had passed away. I had never met my uncle. He had been estranged from our family for decades. My parents flew overseas for the funeral. When my dad came back and showed me the memorial card from the service, I froze in place. The face printed on that card was identical to the man I saw on the trail, and the one who stood in my room that night. Ever since that moment, I've been haunted by a single question. Why did he come to me?